Josephine's finger trembled on the trigger as the cowboy's shadow filled her tent entrance. Her 3 children huddled behind her silent, with the kind of terror that comes after weeks of crying, produces nothing. The December blizzard screamed outside, but his voice cut through it like a blade. "Ma'am, lower that gun. Your babies are turning blue." She looked down. He was right. Ruby's lips were purple. "I'd rather we all freeze than what, be saved." He stepped closer. "I ain't leaving you out here to die." Before we continue with how this desperate mother's fight for survival became something she never expected, please stay with me until the end of this story and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far Josephine's journey has traveled. Now let me take you back to where it all began 3 months before that cowboy appeared in the storm. The tent canvas had been white once. Now it was the color of Wyoming mud, and desperation a gray-brown that matched the November sky, pressing down on Josephine Hartwell like a physical weight. She sat cross-legged on the frozen ground, her hands working needle and thread through a shirt so torn she wasn't sure why she bothered. Behind her 8-year-old Margaret, Maggie tried to keep 5-year-old William and 3-year-old Ruby quiet. Tried and failed. "Mama, I'm cold." Will's voice was small, defeated. He'd stopped asking for food 2 days ago. "I know, baby." "Mama, Ruby won't stop crying." "I know." "Mama, I know." Josephine's voice cracked. "I know." She dropped the shirt and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push back the tears that came easier every day. Crying wouldn't feed her children, wouldn't mend the tent, wouldn't bring Daniel back from the grave where she'd buried him 3 months ago with the last of their money. 3 months. 90 days of watching her children slowly starve. 90 nights of lying awake wondering which morning she'd wake to find one of them cold and still beside her. "Mrs. Hartwell." Josephine's head snapped up. A woman stood outside the tent. Mrs. Beatrice Aldrich, the banker's wife, wrapped in a wool coat that probably cost more than Josephine's entire life. "Mrs. Aldrich." Josephine scrambled to her feet, shame burning through her colder than the wind. We weren't expecting, clearly." Mrs. Aldrich's eyes swept the tent, the 3 children in their rags, the bare ground they slept on. "I'm here on behalf of the Ladies' Aid Society." Hope fluttered in Josephine's chest. The Ladies' Aid Society. They helped people, didn't they? Widows and orphans, and we've received complaints, Mrs. Aldrich continued, about a woman living in a tent with 3 children on the outskirts of Green River. It's unseemly, Mrs. Hartwell. It reflects poorly on our town. The hope died. "I'm not trying to. I've been looking for work. I've asked everywhere. I can sew, I can cook, I can—" "Yes, I'm sure." Mrs. Aldrich's tone suggested she wasn't sure at all. "Nevertheless, the society has decided that your situation requires intervention. Intervention. Your children should be in the care of someone who can provide for them properly. The orphanage in Cheyenne." "No." The word came out flat, final. "No, ma'am. They're not orphans. They have a mother. A mother who's raising them in a tent as winter approaches." Mrs. Aldrich's voice was sharp now. "Look at them, Mrs. Hartwell. That little one is skin and bones. Is your pride worth more than their lives?" Josephine looked at Ruby. Saw the hollow cheeks, the 2 large eyes, the way her daughter's dress hung on her like a scarecrow's clothes. "They're mine," she whispered. "Then act like it. The society will return in 1 week. If your circumstances haven't improved, we'll have no choice but to involve the territorial authorities." Mrs. Aldrich turned to leave, then paused. "There's a cattle drive leaving for Montana in 2 days. They're hiring camp cooks. I'd suggest you inquire." She swept away, leaving Josephine standing in the November wind, shaking with rage and fear, and something that felt horribly like relief. Because Mrs. Aldrich was right, wasn't she? Ruby was dying. They were all dying slowly, while Josephine clung to them, with hands that couldn't hold on much longer. "Mama," Maggie's voice was careful. "Are they going to take us away?" "No, baby. Never." but she didn't know if that was a promise or a lie. Chapter 2. The Cattle Drive. The trail boss looked Josephine up and down with eyes that made her skin crawl. "You done camp cooking before?" "Yes, sir. For my husband's crew. 20 men 3 times a day." It was true. Daniel had contracted for railroad work before they'd come west, before the fever had taken him in less than a week. "Husband around to vouch for you?" "My husband is dead, sir." "That's so." The trail boss Carson, his name was stepped closer. Too close. "And who's gonna vouch for a widow woman alone with 3 brats?" Josephine stepped back, pulling her children with her. "My work will vouch for itself." "I'm sure it will." His smile showed too many teeth. "Tell you what. You come by my tent tonight after the men are settled. We'll discuss your qualifications." The meaning was clear. Josephine felt bile rise in her throat. "I'm looking for work, Mr. Carson. Honest work." "This is the West Lady. Ain't nothing honest about it." He turned away. "You know where to find me if you change your mind." Maggie tugged her mother's skirt as they walked back toward their tent. "Mama, what did that man mean?" "Nothing, baby. Nothing at all." But Josephine knew exactly what he'd meant. She'd had 3 similar offers in as many weeks. Men who looked at a desperate widow and saw something they could use. Something they could take. She'd rather starve. Chapter 3. The First Real Snow. It started on December 10th, 6 days after Mrs. Aldrich's visit. Light flakes at first pretty against the gray sky, making Ruby clap her hands, and Will run in circles trying to catch them on his tongue. Within an hour, the pretty snow had become a wall of white. Within 2 hours, Josephine couldn't see 5 feet beyond the tent. "Mama, I'm scared." Ruby's voice was barely audible over the wind. "It's all right, baby. Just a little snow." But it wasn't a little snow. It was a blizzard, the kind that killed people on the Wyoming plains every winter. The kind that found the weak and the poor and the desperate and buried them under 6 feet of white silence. The tent shuddered with each gust. Josephine had reinforced the stakes as best she could, but the canvas was old, rotting in places. She'd patched it with pieces of her own clothing until she barely had anything left to wear. "Maggie, get the blankets. All of them. We're going to pile together, keep each other warm." "Mama, we only got 2 blankets." "Then we use them both. Will Ruby come here? Come close." She gathered her children against her chest, wrapped the thin blankets around all of them, and tried to ignore how their small bodies shook with cold. Tried to ignore how she could feel each of their ribs, how light they'd become, how Ruby had stopped crying yesterday because she didn't have the strength anymore. The wind screamed, the tent poles groaned, and Josephine prayed to a God she wasn't sure existed anymore. "Mama." Will's voice was muffled against her chest. "Are we gonna die?" "No, baby. Papa died." That was different. How to explain to a 5-year-old that his father had died because frontier medicine was worthless, because fever didn't care about good intentions, because sometimes God just looked the other way? How to explain that they might die now because society had decided a widow in a tent was too shameful to help, too unseemly to acknowledge? "Papa got sick," Josephine said carefully. "We're just cold, that's all." "Jenny Carter says we're going to get took away to the orphanage." Josephine's arms tightened. "Who's Jenny Carter?" "A girl at the store. She heard her mama talking. Said we're charity cases and her mama won't let us in their house 'cause we're dirty." "Maggie." Josephine's voice was sharp. "You've been taking Will to town." Maggie's face flushed. "I was trying to find work. I'm 8, Mama. I can wash dishes. I can—" "No." Josephine pulled her oldest close. "No, baby, that's not your job. You're 8 years old. You should be in school playing with other children, not—" "But we need money." Maggie's voice was fierce to adult. "Ruby's getting sicker and you're not eating enough, and I heard you crying last night when you thought we were asleep." Silence. Just the wind and the tent shaking and 3 children who'd grown up too fast, looking at their mother with eyes that had seen too much. "I'm sorry," Josephine whispered. "I'm so sorry." "For what, Mama?" "For everything. For marrying Daniel and moving west. For not being stronger, smarter, better. For bringing them into a world that looked at poverty like a disease to be quarantined, rather than a crisis to be solved. For the cold," she said finally. "I'm sorry you're cold." The tent shuddered violently. One of the poles cracked a sound like a gunshot that made them all jump. The canvas sagged inward, pressing down on them. "Mama!" "It's okay, it's okay." Josephine shifted, trying to push the canvas back up, but her hands were numb and the wind was relentless. "Just hold still. Don't move." Another crack, the second pole giving way. The entire structure was collapsing now, slowly, but inevitably bringing the wet canvas down on top of them like a burial shroud. Ruby started to scream. "Shh, baby, shh!" Josephine tried to hold the canvas off them with one arm, while clutching Ruby with the other. "We're going to be fine. We just need to—" A massive gust hit. The last pole snapped. The tent came down, completely trapping them underneath. Darkness. Wet canvas pressed against their faces. Ruby screaming, Will crying. Maggie trying to push the fabric away, with hands too small to make a difference. "Stay calm." Josephine's voice was sharp with panic she couldn't quite hide. "Don't struggle. You'll tear the canvas more. Just hold still." They held still, huddled together in the dark under the collapsed tent, while the blizzard raged outside, and the temperature dropped, and Josephine realized with horrible clarity that this was how they would die. Not from hunger, from cold, suffocated under rotting canvas, while the snow piled on top of them and the wind erased any trace they'd ever existed. "Mama," Ruby's voice was very small. "I don't want to die." "You're not going to die, baby. You promise." Josephine couldn't speak, couldn't lie, couldn't promise something she had no power to deliver. So she just held them, held all 3 of her children as tight as she could, and waited for the cold to take them. Chapter 4. The Sound of Hooves. She heard them through the canvas, muffled at first, then clearer. Hoofbeats. A horse moving through the storm. Josephine's hand found the revolver, Daniel's Navy Colt, the only thing of his she hadn't sold. She'd kept it loaded, kept it close for moments exactly like this. A woman alone with 3 children was prey. Everyone knew it. The only question was whether the predator would be human or animal. The hoofbeats stopped. Close. Too close. "Hello?" A man's voice, deep and carrying even through the wind. "Anyone here? I saw the tent." Josephine didn't wait to hear more. She pushed aside the canvas with her free hand, raised the revolver with the other, and pointed it at the shadow standing 6 feet away. "Back away." Her voice didn't shake. That was something. "Back away, or I'll shoot." The shadow raised both hands. "Easy, ma'am. I'm not here to hurt you." "That's what they all say." "I'm Ben Cross, foreman at Stone Ranch about 5 miles east. I was riding back from town when the storm hit. Saw your tent." "Well, you've seen it. Now leave." "Ma'am." He took a step forward. Josephine cocked the revolver. The click was loud even in the wind. "I said leave." "Can't do that." "Why not?" "Because you got children in there." His voice was quieter now. "I can hear them crying. And that tent's collapsed. And this storm's gonna get worse before it gets better." "That's none of your concern." "Maybe not." Another step. "But I'm making it my concern." "I will shoot you." "Maybe. But before you do, look at your little ones. Really look at them." Against her better judgment, Josephine glanced back, saw Ruby's blue lips, saw Will shaking so hard he couldn't stand, saw Maggie trying to be brave and failing. "You can shoot me if you want," the man Ben Cross said quietly. "But first, Let me get your children somewhere warm. Then you can decide whether I'm worth a bullet." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would you help us?" "Because somebody helped me once when I needed it." He took another step close enough now that she could see his face in the swirling snow. Young, maybe 30, with dark hair and eyes that looked sad even in the storm. And because no child should freeze to death while folks ride past and do nothing. Josephine's hand wavered. The gun was heavy. Her arm was tired. Her children were dying. "You'll want something in return." It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." There it was. The price. It was always something. "What?" "I want you to live through the night." His voice was firm. "That's all. Live through tonight. Tomorrow you can tell me to go to hell if you want. But tonight, your babies need shelter." Ruby's crying had stopped. That was worse than the crying. Silence meant she didn't have the strength anymore. Josephine lowered the gun. "One night," she said. "One night," he agreed. "And if you touch me or my children, I know. You'll shoot me." He moved toward the collapsed tent. "Fair enough. Now let's get these little ones out of the cold before we all freeze talking about it." He was strong. That was the first thing Josephine noticed. He lifted the canvas off them like it weighed nothing, then scooped up Ruby before Josephine could protest. "She's cold as ice," he said grimly. "This one needs warming fast." "Give her to me." "Ma'am, you can barely stand. Let me help." "I don't need—" "Yes, you do." He wasn't looking at her, was focused on Ruby rubbing her arms, breathing warm air on her face. "Pride's a luxury. You got time for pride or you got time to save your daughter." Josephine's throat closed. She nodded. "Good. You carry the boy. I'll take this little miss. The older girl can walk." "Yes." "Then let's move. My horse can carry all of us if we're careful." "Where?" "Empty foreman's cabin about a mile from here. It's got walls, a roof, a fireplace. That's where we're going." "I can't." "You can argue with me when we get there. Right now we move." He was already walking toward a dark shape in the snow, a horse standing patient in the blizzard. How he'd found them. How he'd known they were here, Josephine didn't understand. Didn't have time to understand. Will wrapped his arms around her neck. "Mama is the man gonna hurt us. No baby." "How do you know?" "Because Josephine said watching Ben Cross wrap Ruby in his own coat. If he wanted to hurt us, he wouldn't have bothered with the coat." It wasn't much logic, but it was all she had. Chapter 5. The Ride. Getting 5 people onto one horse should have been impossible. Ben made it look easy. Ruby went first, tucked inside his coat against his chest. Then Maggie behind him holding tight to his waist. Then Will in front of Maggie. Finally Josephine behind all of them, her arms wrapped around her children, trying to ignore how close she was pressed against this stranger's back. "Everyone hold tight," Ben said. "It's gonna be rough." Rough didn't begin to describe it. The wind hit them from every direction. Snow drove into Josephine's face hard enough to sting. She couldn't see anything. Beyond white chaos, couldn't tell which way they were moving, couldn't do anything but hold on and trust that Ben Cross knew where he was going. The horse, a mare steady and sure-footed, moved through the drifts like she'd done it 1,000 times. Maybe she had. This was Wyoming. This was winter. People died in storms like this every year. But not tonight. Please God, not tonight. Almost there. Ben's voice cut through the wind. 5 more minutes. 5 minutes felt like 50. But then, through the white, Josephine saw it. Dark wood, a door. Windows that glowed with the memory of past fires. A cabin. Ben dismounted first, still holding Ruby. Reached up to help Maggie down, then Will. Finally offered his hand to Josephine. She ignored it. Slid down on her own and nearly fell when her frozen legs wouldn't hold her. "Stubborn," Ben muttered. But he didn't push. Just led them to the door opened. It ushered them inside. Warmth. It hit Josephine like a wall. Not heat. The cabin was cold, but shelter. No wind, no snow, solid walls and a real roof and a floor that wasn't frozen mud. Ruby was still silent. That was wrong. Babies were supposed to cry, supposed to make noise. Silence meant, "She's breathing," Ben said as if reading Josephine's mind. "Pulse is weak but steady. We need to warm her slowly. Too fast and we'll shock her system." Whoa. How do you know that? Had a horse nearly freeze once. Vet told me the same thing. He was already moving, laying Ruby on the floor near the fireplace, rubbing her arms and legs. "Maggie is it." Maggie nodded wide-eyed. "Good girl. I need you to help me. Can you do that?" Another nod. "There's blankets in that chest. Bring me 2. And that lamp on the table, light it. Your mama's gonna need to see what she's doing." "What am I doing?" Josephine asked. "Checking the boy. Make sure he's not frostbit, especially his fingers and toes." Will's fingers. God, she hadn't even thought. Josephine knelt beside her son, pulled off his thin shoes, tried not to gasp at how white his feet were. "Will, baby, can you wiggle your toes?" "I can't feel them, Mama." "Try, for me." He tried. Nothing happened. "Mr. Cross." "Ben." He didn't look up from Ruby. "And I see it. Soon as I get this little one stable, we'll work on his feet. Right now, rub them. Gentle. Get the blood moving." Josephine rubbed. Prayed. Rubbed more. "Mama, it hurts." "I know, baby. That's good. Hurt means you can feel. Feel is good." Maggie brought the blankets. Ben wrapped Ruby like a cocoon, then moved to the fireplace. Within minutes, he had a fire going, a real fire with actual heat that spread through the cabin like a blessing. "Water," he said. "There's a pump outside, but the pipes are probably frozen. I'll have to melt snow." "I can do it," Josephine said. "You can sit down before you fall down. I got this." "I don't need—" "Yes, you do." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. "When's the last time you ate?" Josephine didn't answer. "That's what I thought. Sit. I'll make food. Then we'll talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You've done your Christian duty. In the morning we'll see what the morning brings." His voice was firm. "Tonight you're here. Your children are warming up. And you're going to eat if I have to force feed you myself." "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." They stared at each other. Josephine saw no threat in his eyes, no calculation, just a bone-deep stubbornness that matched her own. "One night," she repeated. "One night," he agreed. Ruby made a sound, small, whimpering, but alive. So alive. Josephine's knees gave out. She sat down hard on the cabin floor and watched her children breathe and let herself believe for the first time in 3 months that maybe they would survive this. Maybe they would all survive. Chapter 6. Soup and Suspicion. Ben Cross made soup. That was Josephine's first real indication that he might be exactly what he claimed, a man trying to help, nothing more. Men with bad intentions didn't make soup. She watched him move around the small cabin with easy familiarity, pulling supplies from shelves, heating water, adding dried beef and beans, and something that smelled like heaven after months of near starvation. "This cabin yours?" Josephine asked carefully. "Belongs to Stone Ranch, for the foreman." He stirred the pot. "I've been sleeping in the bunkhouse since the last foreman moved on. This place just sits empty most times." "Why?" "Why what? Why does it sit empty? Why don't you live here?" He shrugged. "Bunkhouse is closer to the main house. Easier to get to work." "So why bring us here instead of the bunkhouse?" "Because the bunkhouse has 20 ranch hands who ain't seen a woman in 6 months. Seemed safer this way." The bluntness of it, the casual acknowledgement that yes, there was danger, but he'd thought about it and chosen the safer option, made Josephine relax slightly. "Mama," Will's voice was small, "my feet hurt real bad." "That's good, baby. Means they're warming up." "But it hurts." "I know." Ben brought over the soup in tin cups. "Drink it slow. Your bellies ain't used to real food." He was right. Maggie took one sip and started coughing. Will managed two before having to stop. Ruby couldn't drink at all. She was asleep now or unconscious. Josephine couldn't tell which. "The little one," Ben said quietly. "She gonna be all right?" "I don't know." "How long she been like that?" "Getting worse every day for 2 weeks. There's a doctor in town, but he wants payment up front, and I don't have—" Josephine's voice broke. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll send for him tomorrow." "No." "Ma'am?" "I said no. I can't pay for a doctor. I won't be in debt to—" "You ain't gonna be in debt to nobody." His voice was firm. "Stone Ranch has an account with Doc Morrison. I'll tell him it's for one of the Hands family. He won't ask questions." "That's dishonest." "That's necessary." Ben met her eyes. "Your baby needs a doctor. I can get you one. That's all that matters." "Why?" Josephine's voice rose. "Why do you care? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." "That's where you're wrong." He set down his soup. "You want to know why I'm helping you?" "Yes." "All right." He leaned back against the wall. "When I was about that boy's age, my mama and me were in a bad way. My daddy had run off drunk away everything we had. We were living in a boarding house in Kansas City, about a week from being thrown out on the street." He paused, staring at the fire. "And then a woman, a widow who ran a bakery, found out somehow. She offered my mama a job. Room above the shop for us to live in. No questions asked. No judgment. Just help when we needed it most." "What happened?" "My mama worked for her for 3 years. Best 3 years of my life. Then, consumption took mama when I was 12. His voice was steady, but Josephine heard the old pain underneath. "Before she died, she made me promise something. Made me swear that if I ever had the means to help someone who was struggling the way we struggled, I wouldn't hesitate. Wouldn't let pride or fear or what folks might think stop me from doing what was right." Silence. Just the fire crackling and Ruby's shallow breathing and the storm still raging outside. "So that's why," Ben said simply. "I'm keeping a promise to my mama, and maybe making sure her death wasn't for nothing." Josephine felt something crack in her chest. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Me too." He picked up his soup again. "But her lesson stuck. And when I saw your tent about to collapse in that storm, I heard her voice clear as day telling me what I had to do. What if I'd shot you? Then I'd be dead, and you'd still be in a collapsing tent." He smiled slightly. "Seemed worth the risk." "You're insane." "Maybe. Or maybe I just remember what it's like to be desperate, to be afraid, to think nobody in the world gives a damn whether you live or die." He looked at her. "I give a damn, Mrs. Hartwell, whether you want me to or not." Josephine didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond to kindness that came without conditions, help that didn't demand payment, compassion that asked nothing in return. So she just nodded, and drank her soup, and watched her children sleep in a warm cabin instead of freezing in a collapsed tent. And for the first time in 3 months, she let herself feel something other than fear. She let herself feel hope. Josephine woke to silence. Not the terrifying silence of a collapsed tent, but the peaceful quiet of a cabin at dawn. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory flooded back the storm, the stranger, the desperate ride through the blizzard. She sat up fast, her heart hammering. Ruby. Where was Easy? Ben's voice came from across the room. "She's right here, sleeping." Josephine's eyes adjusted to the dim light. Ben sat in a chair by the fireplace. Ruby curled in his lap, wrapped in blankets. He hadn't moved all night. "You stayed up with her?" Someone had to. Her breathing was rough. Didn't want to take chances. He shifted carefully, trying not to wake the child. "She's better this morning." Color's back in her cheeks. Josephine crossed the cabin in 3 steps, pressed her hand to Ruby's forehead. Cool. Not the icy cold of last night, but normal. Alive. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. We got a long way to go before... He stopped, looked at her. You're crying. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Josephine wiped her face angrily. I don't cry. Could have fooled me. But his voice was gentle. It's all right to cry, ma'am. You've been through hell. Crying doesn't fix anything. No. But holding it all in doesn't either. He stood slowly, transferred Ruby to Josephine's arms. I'm gonna step outside, check the weather. You take a minute. Let yourself feel whatever you need to feel. He left. Josephine held Ruby and felt the tears come properly now, hot and fast and unstoppable. 3 months of holding it together, of being strong for her children, of refusing to break, no matter how bad it got. All of it came pouring out in great shaking sobs that she tried to muffle against Ruby's hair. Mama! Maggie's voice was small. Are you okay? Josephine looked up. All 3 children were awake now, watching her with frightened eyes. I'm fine, babies. Mama's fine. Then why are you crying? Because... Josephine's voice caught. Because we're alive. Because we're warm. Because last night I thought I was going to lose you all, and this morning you're here. Will climbed down from the bed and wrapped his arms around her waist. We're here, Mama. We're okay. I know, baby. I know. The door opened. Ben stepped back inside, stamping snow off his boots. Storm's passed. Roads will be hell for a few days, but... He stopped when he saw them all clustered together. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting. Josephine wiped her face one more time. What did you say about the roads? Snowed another foot overnight. Nothing's moving for at least 3 days. Maybe longer. 3 days. 3 more days in this cabin with a man she barely knew. 3 more days of accepting charity she had no way to repay. I see. Josephine set Ruby down carefully. Then we should discuss terms. Terms. For staying here, I won't accept charity, Mr. Cross. If we're to impose on your hospitality for 3 more days, I insist on working for it. Ben's expression was unreadable. What kind of work? I can cook, clean, mend your clothes, whatever you need. I need you to rest and let your children recover. I need to earn our keep. Why? His voice was sharp now. Why can't you just accept help? Because help always comes with a price. The words came out harder than she intended. Because I learned that lesson 3 months ago when every person in Green River looked at me and my children and decided we weren't worth saving unless we could offer something in return. I ain't every person in Green River. How do I know that? Silence. Ben's jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled. You don't. You got no reason to trust me except my word, and words are cheap. So here's what we're gonna do. You want to work, fine. There's mending that needs doing. Clothes in that chest over there. But you're gonna eat first. Full breakfast. And you're gonna let me send for the doctor to check Ruby. I told you. And I told you I got a way to handle it without you being in debt to nobody. Now stop being so damn stubborn and let me help your baby. They stared at each other. Josephine saw no threat in his eyes. No calculation, just frustration, and something that looked like hurt. Fine, she said finally. But I want to be clear. This is temporary. As soon as the road's clear, we're leaving. Where are you gonna go? That's not your concern. It is if you're planning on going back to that tent. I don't have anywhere else to go. Yes, you do. Ben crossed his arms. You can stay here. Work at the ranch. Mrs. Jang, she runs the main house. She's been asking for help with the sewing. Real work, real wages. You'd have this cabin steady income, and your children would have shelter and food. Josephine's heart jumped. Real work. Steady wages. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I get a maintenance worker for an empty cabin. I get someone to help Mrs. Zhang, which means she stops complaining to me about how she can't keep up with all the mending. And I get to keep the promise I made to my mama. He paused. That enough for you? I don't know. Then think about it. But right now I'm making breakfast. Your children are hungry, and you can decide whatever you want after they're fed. He moved to the stove before Josephine could respond. Within minutes, the cabin filled with the smell of frying bacon and eggs. Real eggs, not the watered-down cornmeal mush they'd been surviving on. Will's stomach growled audibly. Maggie tried not to stare at the pan. Ruby, awake now, made a small sound of longing. All right, Josephine said quietly. We'll eat, and then we'll talk. Ben just nodded and kept cooking. The breakfast was the best meal Josephine had eaten in months. Maybe years. She tried to eat slowly, tried to set a good example for the children, but her body betrayed her. She was starving. They were all starving. And Ben Cross had more food in this cabin than they'd seen in 3 months. Easy, Ben said, when Will started coughing. I know it tastes good, but your belly's gonna revolt if you eat too fast. Sorry, Will managed between coughs. Nothing to be sorry for. Just slow down. Food ain't going anywhere. After breakfast, Ben left to ride to the main ranch house. Gonna tell Mrs. Zhang about you, he said. And send someone for the doctor. I'll be back before noon. Josephine wanted to argue, wanted to insist they didn't need a doctor, didn't need Mrs. Zhang, didn't need anything from anyone. But Ruby was still pale, still weak, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. Thank you, she said instead. Ben paused at the door. You're welcome. And Mrs. Hartwell stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes help is just help. He left before she could respond. Maggie tugged her mother's sleeve. Mama, is he really gonna help us? I don't know, baby. I think he is. Maggie's voice was thoughtful. He stayed up all night with Ruby. Papa used to do that when we were sick. Remember? Josephine did remember. Daniel rocking a feverish Maggie, singing off-key lullabies until dawn. Daniel's gentle hands and steady presence and absolute certainty that everything would be all right. Daniel, who'd died and left them with nothing but memories, and a broken wagon, and $7 that ran out in 3 weeks. Mr. Cross isn't your papa, Josephine said carefully. I know, but maybe... Maggie stopped. Never mind. What baby? Nothing. Can I look at the books on that shelf? Josephine glanced over. A small bookshelf held maybe a dozen volumes, practical ranch guides, a Bible, a few novels with worn covers. You can look. Don't damage them. Maggie crossed to the shelf with the careful steps of a child who'd learned to make herself small and quiet. Who'd learned that attracting attention could be dangerous. Josephine's chest tightened. What had she done to her children? What had these 3 months of desperation and fear taught them about the world? Mama. Will's voice was uncertain. Are we really going to stay here? I don't know yet. I like it here. It's warm. I know, baby. And Mr. Cross is nice. He seems nice. Papa was nice too. The simple statement hit Josephine like a fist. Will was 5 years old. His father had been dead for 3 months. Already Daniel's memory was fading, being replaced by the newer, sharper memories of cold and hunger and fear. Yes, Josephine said softly. Papa was very nice. Do you think he'd want us to stay here with Mr. Cross? What would Daniel want, Daniel who'd dragged them west, chasing dreams of land and opportunity? Daniel who'd died of fever before those dreams could become reality. Daniel who'd left her alone with 3 children and no way to provide for them. Would he want her to accept help from a stranger? Would he want his children warm and fed, even if it meant his widow living in another man's cabin? I think, Josephine said carefully, that Papa would want us to be safe, and warm, and together. Then we should stay. It's not that simple, baby. Why not? Because nothing was ever that simple. Because accepting help meant owing debts. Because she'd learned that kindness came with strings attached, and she was terrified of what Ben Cross might expect in return for his generosity. But she couldn't say any of that to a 5-year-old boy who just wanted to be warm. "We'll see," she said instead. "Let's wait until Mr. Cross gets back." Ben returned 2 hours later with a woman who radiated the kind of energy that made Josephine straighten unconsciously. Small, maybe 60 years old, Chinese with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that missed nothing. "This is Mrs. Zhang," Ben said. "She runs the main ranch house." "Li Mei," the woman corrected, looking Josephine up and down with an expression that suggested she was cataloging every patch, every stain, every sign of poverty. "Mrs. Zhang is too formal for a woman who will be working with me." "I haven't agreed to—" "Ben tells me you can sew." "Yes, ma'am, but—" "Good. I have 3 baskets of mending that's been waiting for months. The ranch hands are hard on clothes, always tearing, always wearing through. The last seamstress left to get married 6 months ago. Since then, it's been piling up." Li Mei crossed to the chest Ben had mentioned earlier, pulled it open. "This is maybe 1/4 of what needs doing." Josephine looked at the pile of clothes. Shirts with torn seams. Pants with holes worn through the knees. Socks that were more hole than sock. "I can do this," she said slowly, "but I'd need supplies, thread, needles, patches. Already in the basket, plus buttons, extra fabric, everything you need." Li Mei's expression softened slightly. "Ben says you need work. I need seamstress. Seems simple to me." "What's the pay?" $2 a week, plus you keep this cabin rent-free, plus meals while you work at the main house 4 days a week, mornings until afternoon. This gives you time for your own children and your own household." $2 a week. That was more than Josephine had hoped for. More than any of the Green River families had been willing to pay when she'd begged for work. "That's very generous." "Not generous, practical." Li Mei's voice was brisk. "I need good work. You need money. Everyone benefits. You start tomorrow if the doctor says your children are well enough." "The doctor is coming this afternoon." Li Mei's expression brooked no argument. "Ben says the little one is sick. We check, make sure. Then you work. Understood." It wasn't really a question. Josephine found herself nodding anyway. "Good. Now I must go back. Ranch doesn't run itself." Li Mei moved to the door, then paused. "One more thing. Your children, they eat meals at main house while you work. They help with small tasks. The oldest girl can wash dishes. The boy can gather eggs from chicken coop. The little one stays with you. This is part of arrangement." "I can't accept—" "You can and you will." Li Mei's voice was firm. "Children need food. I need help in kitchen. This is trade, not charity. Understand difference." Josephine met the older woman's eyes. Saw no pity there, no judgment. Just the same practical assessment. Ben had shown a problem that needed solving and a solution that worked for everyone. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good." Li Mei nodded once, sharp and definite. "Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, Ben will show you the way." She swept out, leaving Josephine staring after her. "She's terrifying," Josephine said. "Yep," Ben agreed cheerfully. "But she's fair, and she means what she says. If she offers you work, she expects you to do it. But she'll pay what she promises, and she won't cheat you." "How do you know?" "Because she's been running that ranch house for 25 years. Colonel Stone, he owns the place. He trusts her with everything. If Mrs. Zhang vouches for you, nobody at Stone Ranch is going to question it." Josephine sank into a chair. "This is really happening." "Looks like it." "I don't understand why you're doing this." "I told you why." "A promise to your mother. I know. But—" Josephine looked at him. "You don't even know us. We could be thieves, liars. We could rob you blind and disappear." "Could," Ben agreed. "But you won't." "How do you know?" "Because you pointed a gun at me last night to protect your children. Because you tried to refuse help, even when refusing might have killed you. Because every instinct you got is screaming not to trust me, but you're doing it anyway for their sake." He nodded toward the children. "That ain't the behavior of a thief, ma'am. That's the behavior of a mother who'd do anything to keep her babies safe." Tears pricked Josephine's eyes again. She blinked them back furiously. "Stop doing that," she said. "Doing what?" "Being kind. It makes it harder." "Harder to what?" "To keep my walls up, to stay suspicious, to protect myself from—" She stopped. "From disappointment." Ben's voice was quiet. "From trusting someone and having them let you down." "Yes." "I can't promise I won't disappoint you. I'm human. I'll make mistakes. But I can promise I won't lie to you, won't cheat you, and won't expect anything from you except honest work for honest pay." He met her eyes. "That enough?" Josephine wanted to say no, wanted to grab her children and run back to the tent, back to their poverty and desperation and independence. At least in the tent, she'd known where she stood. At least there she'd been in control, even if what she controlled was their slow starvation. But Ruby was warm and fed and breathing steady. Will's feet had recovered from frostbite. Maggie was reading a book by the fireplace, her face peaceful for the first time in months. "It's enough," Josephine whispered. "For now, it's enough." The doctor arrived mid-afternoon. Dr. Morrison was an older man with gentle hands and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Josephine of Lee May. "Ben tells me you've got a sick child." "My youngest. She's been weak for weeks. I didn't have money for a doctor." "Well, you got one now." Dr. Morrison knelt beside Ruby. "Hello, little miss. I'm going to take a look at you. That all right?" Ruby looked at her mother. Josephine nodded. "It's all right, baby. Let the doctor help." The examination was thorough. Dr. Morrison checked Ruby's breathing, her heart, her throat, asked questions about what she'd been eating, how long she'd been sick, whether she had fever or chills. Finally, he sat back. "Malnutrition mostly. Some fluid in her lungs, but not pneumonia yet. Another few days in that tent, and it would have been pneumonia for sure. You got her out just in time." "Will she be all right?" "With proper food and warmth, yes, she'll recover." Dr. Morrison stood dusting off his pants. "Keep feeding her regular. Small portions her stomach needs to adjust, lots of fluids, and keep her warm. No more sleeping in tents." "We're staying here," Josephine said. "For now." "Good. I'll check on her again in a week." He looked at Ben. "Send for me if she takes a turn." "I will. What do I owe you?" "Put it on the ranch account. Colonel Stone won't mind." After the doctor left, Josephine turned to Ben. "How much did that cost?" "Don't worry about it. I want to know what I owe. You don't owe me anything." "Mr. Cross." "Ben, and I mean it. The ranch pays for medical care for employees and their families. You're Mrs. Zhang's new seamstress. That makes you an employee. Your children get medical care. That's how it works." "I haven't even started working yet." "Details." Ben waved a hand. "Mrs. Zhang vouched for you. That's good enough." Josephine wanted to argue, wanted to insist on paying him back somehow. But the truth was, she had no way to pay him back. She had $7 to her name, and even that was probably buried under snow where the tent had collapsed. "Thank you," she said instead. "I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done, but I promise I'll work hard. I'll earn my keep. I won't make you regret helping us." "I won't regret it." Ben's voice was certain. "I know that already." "How?" "Because I can see who you are. A fighter, a survivor. Someone who kept 3 children alive against impossible odds. That kind of strength don't disappear just because circumstances change." He smiled slightly. "You're going to be just fine, Mrs. Hartwell, all of you. That night, after the children were asleep and Ben had retired to his bedroll by the fireplace, maintaining that careful distance that made Josephine trust him a little more each hour she lay awake and thought about Daniel. Would he approve of this? His wife accepting help from a stranger living in a cabin with a man she barely knew planning to work at a ranch instead of keeping house like a proper widow should Daniel had been traditional in some ways. He'd liked having Josephine at home, liked coming back to a clean house and hot meal. He'd been proud of her sewing skills, but had never imagined she'd need to use them to support the family. But Daniel was dead, and Josephine was alive, and her children were alive. And maybe that was what mattered most. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm sorry I couldn't keep your dreams alive. I'm sorry I had to accept help from another man. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough to do this alone." No answer. Just the fire crackling and Ruby's steady breathing and the wind outside that was finally starting to calm. "But I'm not sorry we're alive," she added. "Whatever else happens, whatever compromises I have to make, I'll never be sorry we're alive." Across the cabin, Ben shifted in his sleep, murmured something too low to hear. Settled again. Josephine pulled the blanket closer and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd start working. Tomorrow, she'd begin earning her place at Stone Ranch. Tomorrow, she'd take the first real step toward building a life for her children that wasn't defined by desperation and fear. Tomorrow was full of unknowns. But for the first time in 3 months, Josephine found she wasn't terrified of them. She was almost hopeful. And hope, she was learning, was a dangerous thing. Because once you let it in, once you allowed yourself to believe that things might actually get better, you had so much more to lose. But maybe, just maybe, it was a risk worth taking. The first day of work came too fast and too slow at the same time. Josephine woke before dawn, her stomach twisted with nerves that felt familiar and foreign all at once. She'd worked before, cooked for Daniel's crews, kept house, raised 3 children. But this was different. This was accepting help from strangers. This was admitting she couldn't do it alone. Ben was already up stoking the fire. He glanced over when she stirred. "Morning. You ready?" "No." "Good. Means you care about doing it right." He poured coffee into a tin cup, handed it to her. "Mrs. Zhang's strict but fair. Do what she asks, don't complain, and you'll be fine." Josephine wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "What if I'm not good enough?" "You kept 3 children alive in a tent for 3 months. You're good enough." His voice was matter-of-fact. "Now drink that, and get the young ones ready. We leave in 20 minutes. The walk to the main ranch house took 15 minutes through snow that came up to Josephine's knees in places. Ben carried Ruby, who was still too weak to walk far. Will trudged beside his mother, holding tight to her hand. Maggie walked ahead with Ben, asking him questions about the ranch, the horses, everything. "How many cattle you got?" "About 3,000 head, plus horses, chickens, some pigs." "That's a lot of animals." "It is." "You take care of all of them?" "Me and about 20 ranch hands. Plus, Mrs. Zhang runs the house, and Colonel Stone owns the whole operation." "What's a colonel?" "Military rank. From the war." "Which war?" Ben's expression tightened slightly. "The one that split the country in half. Colonel Stone fought for the Union, lost his wife during that time, never remarried." Josephine filed that information away. A widower running a ranch with the help of a Chinese housekeeper and a foreman who'd lost his mother young. Stone Ranch seemed to be a collection of people who'd survived loss and found purpose in work. Maybe that's why they were willing to help a widow with 3 children. Maybe they recognized their own pain in hers. The ranch house was larger than Josephine expected. 2 stories, dark wood with smoke rising from 3 different chimneys. Lights glowed in the windows, warm against the gray dawn. "Back entrance," Ben said, leading them around to a door that opened into the kitchen. The warmth hit Josephine first. Then the smells: bread, baking coffee, brewing bacon, frying. Her stomach growled so loud, Will looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mama." "I'm fine, baby." Lee May appeared from behind a massive cast-iron stove, wooden spoon in hand. "You're early? Good. I like people who are early." She looked at the children. The older girl, Maggie, "Yes, you come with me. I show you how to wash dishes properly." The boy, William, "You go with Ben to the chicken coop. Your mother and the little one stay here." "Wait," Josephine started. "I don't wait. We have work to do." Lee May was already moving, gesturing for Maggie to follow. "Your daughter helps with breakfast dishes. Then we see what else she can do. You eat first. Can't sew on an empty stomach." Before Josephine could protest, a plate appeared in front of her. Eggs, bacon, toast with real butter. Enough food for 3 meals, maybe 4. "I can't." "You can and you will." Lee May's voice was firm. "You're too thin. The children are too thin. You eat what I give you. No arguing." Josephine looked at Ben, who just shrugged. "I told you, she's terrifying." "I'm not terrifying. I'm practical." Lee May turned back to the stove. "Terrifying is letting someone work when they're weak from hunger. That's when mistakes happen. Eat." So Josephine ate. She tried to go slow, tried to be ladylike about it, but she was starving and the food was the best thing she'd tasted since she couldn't remember when. Ruby sat on her lap, taking small bites. Josephine fed her, and for the first time in months, Josephine felt something like contentment. After breakfast, Lee May led her to a sunlit room off the main hallway. "This is where you work. Table, chair, good light from window. The mending is in those 3 baskets. Start with what's most urgent: shirts with torn shoulders, pants with holes. The ranch hands need those for work. The rest can wait." Josephine looked at the baskets. They were overflowing, just like Lee May had said. Months of neglect, all waiting for her needle. "Where do you want me to start?" "Wherever you think best. You're the seamstress. I trust your judgment." Lee May paused at the door. "One more thing. You work your 4 hours, then you eat lunch. Then you take your children and go back to the cabin. I don't want you working yourself sick trying to prove something." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." "Good. I bring you tea in 1 hour. You need anything before then you call." She left. Josephine stood alone in the workroom, with Ruby dozing in a chair nearby, and 3 baskets of mending waiting. She took a deep breath, selected a shirt from the top of the nearest basket, and began to work. The first stitch felt like coming home. Her hands knew what to do, even if her mind was still spinning. Thread through needle knot at the end, small even stitches that would hold. She'd learned this at her mother's knee back in Philadelphia, when life was predictable and safe, and she'd never imagined she'd need these skills to survive. But she did need them, and she was grateful for every lesson her mother had drilled into her, every hour spent practicing until her fingers cramped. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for teaching me something useful." An hour passed, then 2. Lee May brought tea as promised, took one look at Josephine's work, and nodded approval. "Good, very good. You have skilled hands." "Thank you." "The shirt you just finished, that's for Ben. He tore it 3 weeks ago on barbed wire. Been wearing shirts with holes ever since, because nobody to mend them." Lee May's expression softened slightly. "He's a good man, works hard, doesn't complain, deserves to have clothes that fit properly." Josephine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sure he does." "He's not married." "That's none of my business." "Maybe it should be." Lee May's eyes were sharp. "You're a widow with 3 children. He's a foreman with good prospects. Colonel Stone is getting old. Talks about making Ben a partner. That means land house security." "Mrs. Zhang." "Lee May." "Lee May, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not looking for a husband." "No. What are you looking for?" "Work. A way to support my children. That's all." Lee May didn't sound convinced. "We'll see. Keep sewing. I check on you in another hour." She left before Josephine could respond. Josephine picked up the next shirt, Ben's shirt apparently, and tried not to think about the man who'd pulled them from a blizzard. Tried not to think about his steady presence, his gentle hands with Ruby, the way he'd stayed up all night to make sure her daughter kept breathing. Tried not to think about how safe she'd felt in the cabin with him nearby. She was still trying not to think about it when Maggie burst into the workroom 2 hours later, face flushed with excitement. Mama, guess what? What baby? Mrs. Zhang says I can help make bread tomorrow, real bread with yeast and everything. She says I got good hands for kneading. Josephine set down her sewing. That's wonderful, sweetheart. And she says if I work hard, she'll teach me to make pies. Can you believe it? Real pies? Maggie was practically bouncing. And she gave me a ribbon, see, for my hair. She says every girl should have a ribbon. The ribbon was simple, just blue cotton, but Maggie wore it like a crown. Josephine felt her throat tighten. That's very kind of her. She's nice, Mama. She's strict but nice, like Grandma Morrison used to be. Josephine's mother had died 5 years ago. Maggie had been too young to remember much about her, but apparently she remembered the important parts. The strictness that came from caring, not cruelty. The high standards that pushed you to be better. Yes, Josephine said softly. She is like Grandma. Will appeared next, covered in feathers and chicken feed, grinning ear to ear. Mama, I got 12 eggs. Ben says that's real good for winter, and one of the hens let me pet her. Her name's General Feathers, and she's my favorite. General Feathers. Ben says all the hens got military names 'cause Colonel Stone named them. There's General Feathers, and Major Cluckington, and Sergeant Peck. Will's face was alight with joy Josephine hadn't seen in months. Can we get chickens, Mama? Please, I'll take care of them, I promise. We'll see, baby. That means no. That means we'll see. Li Mei appeared behind Will, looking amused. The boy has a gift with animals. The chickens like him. Usually they peck strangers. He's always been gentle with animals, Josephine said. His father used to say he had a healing touch. His father was right. Li Mei's gaze was assessing. You've done well with these children. They're polite, hardworking, eager to learn. That speaks well of you. Thank you. Now, lunch. You've worked 4 hours. Time to eat and rest. I'm not finished. You're finished for today. We don't work our people to death here. Tomorrow you come back, work another 4 hours. Slow and steady wins the race. Li Mei gestured toward the door. Go, eat. Ben will walk you back to the cabin. Lunch was hearty stew, fresh bread and milk, real milk, not the watered-down version they'd been surviving on. The children ate like they'd never seen food before, and Josephine had to remind them to slow down, to breathe between bites. Ben sat across from them, eating his own meal in companionable silence. When Will started to nod off over his empty bowl, Ben stood. Come on, let's get you folks back before someone falls asleep in their stew. The walk back was quieter than the walk there. Will was asleep on Ben's shoulder within minutes. Ruby dozed in Josephine's arms. Only Maggie was still alert, chattering about everything she'd learned in the kitchen. And Mrs. Zhang says I can come every day if I want. She says the kitchen always needs help, and I'm a quick learner, and she's going to teach me Chinese words too. Did you know? Li Mei means beautiful plum. Isn't that pretty? Very pretty baby. And Ben's teaching Will about horses. He says Will can help train the new colt in spring if he keeps doing good with the chickens. Josephine glanced at Ben. That's very kind of you. The boy's got talent. Be ashamed to waste it. Ben shifted Will to his other shoulder. Besides, ranch needs good hands. Might as well train them young. They reached the cabin. Ben helped get the children inside and settled for naps. The morning's work had exhausted all of them. You did good today, he said quietly, standing by the door. I barely made a dent in those baskets. You made a dent. That's what matters. Mrs. Zhang seems pleased. She offered me a permanent position. That's good news. Is it? Josephine met his eyes. Yesterday we were starving in a tent. Today I'm working at a ranch. My children are being trained in useful skills, and a Chinese housekeeper is talking to me about you like you're a potential husband candidate. It's all happening so fast." Ben's expression didn't change. "Mrs. Zhang talks too much. Does she? Or is she right? About what? About you. About your prospects. About—" Josephine stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "About me looking at you like you're more than just a widow I pulled out of a storm." Ben's voice was quiet, but steady. "Yeah, she's right about that." Josephine's breath caught. "Mr. Cross?" "Ben. And before you panic, I ain't asking you for anything. I know it's too soon. I know you got a dead husband and 3 children and a whole lot of trauma you're trying to survive. I ain't pushing." He paused. "But I ain't gonna pretend I don't see you either. See you as a person, not a charity case. See you as a woman who's strong and smart and fighting like hell to keep her family together." "I don't know what to say to that." "Don't say anything. Just think about it. Think about the possibility that maybe you don't have to do this alone forever. That maybe there's a future where you got help that ain't charity. Where you got a partner instead of just an employer." "My husband's been dead 3 months." "I know. People will talk. People already are talking. Widow living in the foreman's cabin might as well give them something real to gossip about." "You're insane." "Maybe. Or maybe I just know what I want and ain't afraid to say it." He tipped his hat. "Think about it. That's all I'm asking. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's another work day." He left. Josephine stood by the door, heart pounding, mind racing. Ben Cross was interested in her. Not just helping her. Actually interested. In her. A widow with 3 children and $7 to her name, and more baggage than a freight train could carry. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was the first time in months anyone had looked at her like she was something other than a problem to be solved, or a burden to be carried. And God help her, she liked it. She liked the way he said her name. Josephine, not Mrs. Hartwell, like she was a person, not a title. She liked the way he was gentle with her children, without being condescending. She liked the way he kept his distance, while making it clear he'd close that distance in a heartbeat if she gave him permission. "Mama," Maggie's voice came from the bed. "You okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Go back to sleep." "Are we gonna stay here at the ranch?" Josephine looked around the cabin. Warm walls, a real roof, food in the cupboard and wood for the fire, and the promise of steady work that would let her support her children without begging. "Yes," she said softly. "I think we are." "Good," Maggie yawned. "I like it here. And I like Ben. He's nice." "Yes, he is." "Papa would have liked him too." The words hit Josephine like a physical blow. Would Daniel have liked Ben? Would her traditional, sometimes prideful husband have approved of his widow accepting help from another man? Would he have understood that survival sometimes meant swallowing pride and accepting kindness? Or would he have expected her to do it alone to honor his memory by suffering? Josephine didn't know. Wasn't sure she'd ever know. Daniel was dead and couldn't tell her what he wanted, which meant she had to decide for herself what came next. And what came next, she realized, was choosing life. Choosing her children. Choosing the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was a future beyond mere survival. The next morning came easier. Josephine woke with purpose instead of dread, dressed herself and the children in the clothes Lee May had provided, clean patched but serviceable, and walked to the ranch house with something that felt dangerously like anticipation. The work was hard, but satisfying. Her hands ached by the end of each 4-hour shift. But it was the good ache of productivity, not the desperate cramping of trying to patch a tent that was falling apart faster than she could fix it. Days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. The baskets of mending slowly emptied as Josephine worked through them with methodical efficiency. The ranch hands started nodding to her when she passed, mumbling "ma'am," with a respect that felt unearned but welcome. Will became a fixture at the chicken coop, coming back each afternoon with his egg basket and stories about which hen had done what. Maggie shadowed Li Mei like a devoted apprentice, soaking up every lesson about cooking and household management. Even Ruby started to gain weight, her cheeks filling out her eyes, losing that hollow, haunted look. And Ben. Ben was there every day, walking them to the ranch house each morning, checking on them at lunch, walking them back each afternoon. Always respectful, always careful to maintain appropriate distance, but always present. "You don't have to escort us every day," Josephine said one afternoon. "I know the way now." "I know you do. So why do you keep doing it?" "Because I like your company." "That a crime?" "No, but people are talking." "Let them talk." Ben's voice was unconcerned. "Half of them thought you'd be dead by winter. Prove them wrong and suddenly they're experts on how you should live your life. Ignore them." "Easy for you to say. You're not the widow being judged for accepting help." "No, I'm the foreman being judged for giving it." Ben stopped walking, turned to face her. "You think I ain't heard the talk, that I'm being taken advantage of, that you're using your feminine wiles to trap me into supporting your children?" Josephine felt heat flood her face. "I'm not. I would never. I know that. Mrs. Zhang knows that. Colonel Stone knows that. The people who matter know you're working hard and earning your keep. The rest?" He shrugged. "They're gonna talk no matter what we do. Might as well do what feels right and let them waste their breath." "And what feels right to you?" Ben looked at her for a long moment. "This. Walking with you. Watching your children heal. Seeing you smile when you think nobody's looking. All of that feels right to me." "Ben, I know, too soon, too fast. But Josephine, I ain't a man who hides what he feels. My mama taught me to be honest even when honesty's uncomfortable. So here's my honesty. I care about you. I'm starting to care about you in ways that go beyond Christian charity or keeping promises to my dead mama. And I hope you might be starting to care about me too." Josephine's heart hammered. "What if I am?" "Then we take it slow. We let people talk. We give your children time to adjust. We give you time to grieve properly. We do this right." He paused. "But we do it. We don't pretend these feelings don't exist just because the timing's awkward. My husband is dead. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry you lost him. But he's dead and you're alive and those children need a father. They had a father. And now they need another one. Not a replacement. Daniel's their papa and always will be. But they need someone living who can teach them things and protect them and love them." Ben's voice was steady. "I could be that someone, if you'd let me." Josephine couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 3 months ago, she'd been pointing a gun at this man. Now he was offering to be a father to her children. To be what a husband, a partner, a future. "I can't answer that right now. I'm not asking you to. I'm just putting it out there, so you know where I stand, so you can think about it without wondering what I want. What if I can't give you what you want? Then we'll figure something else out." "But Josephine..." He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was brief, careful, but it sent electricity through her. "Don't say no because you're scared. Don't say no because of what people might think. If you say no, say it because you genuinely don't want this, because you don't feel what I feel. And if I do feel it, then we've got something worth exploring." They stood there in the snow, close enough to touch, but not quite touching, while Josephine's mind spun with possibilities and fears, and something that felt suspiciously like hope. "I need time," she whispered. "Take all the time you need. I ain't going anywhere." That night, after the children were asleep, Josephine stood by the window and looked out at the ranch house in the distance. Lights glowed in the windows. Smoke rose from the chimneys. Somewhere in that building, Li Mei was probably still working, running her domain with efficient precision. And somewhere else, maybe in the bunkhouse, or maybe checking on the horses, Ben was going about his evening, giving her the space she'd asked for. She thought about Daniel. about the life they'd planned and the future they'd lost, about whether loving someone new meant betraying his memory. But then she thought about her children, about Will's laughter when he gathered eggs, about Maggie's pride in her kitchen skills, about Ruby's returning strength and joy. Daniel would want them happy, she realized. Whatever else, he'd been stubborn, sometimes impractical, too focused on dreams he'd loved his children. Would have done anything for them, including maybe blessing his widow's choice to find happiness again with a man who could give those children the father they needed. "I'm going to do this," Josephine whispered to the darkness. "I'm going to let him in. I'm going to take this chance, and I'm going to trust that you'd understand." No answer came, but somehow standing there in the cabin Ben had given them, warm and safe, and fed for the first time in months, Josephine felt something like peace. Tomorrow she'd go back to work. Tomorrow she'd mend more shirts and watch her children thrive, and let Ben Cross walk her home like he had every day for 2 weeks. And maybe tomorrow she'd tell him yes. Not to marriage, not yet too soon for that, but to the possibility of more. To courtship, tentative and careful. To seeing where these feelings led. Maybe tomorrow she'd choose life instead of just survival. Maybe tomorrow she'd choose hope. Tomorrow came, but Josephine's courage didn't. She woke with the words rehearsed in her mind. Words that would tell Ben, yes, she felt it too. Yes, they could explore this careful thing growing between them. But every time she opened her mouth, fear locked her throat shut. What if she was wrong? What if this wasn't real feeling but just gratitude dressed up as something more? What if she let him in and he left? Like Daniel had left, not by choice, but by death or circumstance, or the 1,000 things that could go wrong in this harsh territory. So she stayed silent, worked her shifts, let Ben walk her home, said nothing about the conversation they'd had, and he didn't push, just stayed close, steady, as sunrise patient in ways that made her heart ache. 3 weeks passed like this. February arrived with more snow and bitter cold that kept everyone close to fires and made the walk to the ranch house an exercise in endurance. Josephine's hands grew calloused from the needle, her back stiff from hunching over mending, but the baskets were nearly empty now. She'd worked through months of neglect and was starting on repairs that could wait, torn hems, missing buttons, the small maintenance that kept a ranch running smooth. "You're too good at this," Lee May said one morning, surveying Josephine's work. "At this rate, you'll work yourself out of a job." "I can always find more to do." "Yes, but do we have more for you to do?" Lee May's expression was thoughtful. "The ranch hands' clothes are mended. The house linens are repaired. What comes next?" Josephine's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on proving her worth that she hadn't considered the work might run out. I could make new shirts, or curtains, whatever you need." Lee May tapped her fingers on the work table. "Let me talk to Colonel Stone. He's been wanting new curtains for the parlor, and the winter coats could use updating." "But Josephine," she paused. "This is good problem to have. Means you work well, means we want to keep you. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now finish that hem and come have tea. We need to talk about other things." The tea was strong and hot, served in delicate china cups that seemed out of place in a ranch kitchen. Lee May sat across from Josephine and studied her with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're afraid," Lee May said finally. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. You're afraid of Ben, afraid of what he offers, afraid of being happy again." Josephine set down her cup. "That's not—" "Don't lie to me. I'm too old for lies." Lee May's voice was firm but not unkind. "I see how you look at him. I see how he looks at you. I see two people who care for each other pretending they don't because you're too scared to take the risk. It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You like him. He likes you. Your children adore him. He has good prospects, works hard, treats you with respect. What's the problem?" "My husband is barely cold in his grave." "Your husband has been dead 4 months. That's not barely cold. That's a third of a year. And in that time, you've been fighting just to keep breathing. When do you get to live again?" Josephine felt tears sting her eyes. "I don't know if I remember how." Li Mei's expression softened. "Then let someone teach you. Ben's a good man, Josephine. Best I've known in my 25 years here. He won't hurt you, won't leave you unless death takes him. And even then—" She paused. "Even then, you'll have had something real, something worth the risk of losing." "How do you know?" "Because I took the same risk once." Li Mei's voice was quiet now. "My husband died building the railroad, 20 years ago. I could have gone back to China, back to my family, but Colonel Stone offered me work and I stayed. And I built a life here alone, and it's been good. But sometimes I wonder if I'd met someone like Ben, someone kind and steady, would I have been brave enough to try again? What if I'm not brave enough? You survived 3 months in a tent watching your children starve. You're brave enough." Li Mei stood collecting the teacups. "Now stop making excuses and tell that man how you feel before someone else does." "Someone else. You think you're the only woman who's noticed Ben Cross is a good catch. Martha Peterson's been making eyes at him for months, and her daughter's been bringing him pies every Sunday." Jealousy flared hot and unexpected in Josephine's chest. That's none of my business." "It will be Martha's business if you don't speak up. Ben's patient, but he's not going to wait forever for you to make up your mind." Li Mei headed for the door, then paused. "Think about it. That's all I'm saying. But don't think too long." She left. Josephine sat alone in the workroom, hands shaking slightly, mind racing with images she didn't want. Ben with Martha Peterson. Ben with anyone else. Ben moving on because Josephine was too scared to claim what was right in front of her. "Mama." Maggie appeared in the doorway. "Ben's here. Says he wants to talk to you." Josephine's heart jumped. "About what?" "Dunno, but he looks serious." She found him on the back porch, hat in hand's expression troubled. Her stomach sank. "What's wrong?" "Got some news. Not sure how you're gonna take it." "Just tell me." Ben took a breath. "Your husband, Daniel. Did he have any family back east?" The question caught her off guard. "A brother, Thomas, in Philadelphia. Why?" "Because he's here, in Green River, looking for you." The world tilted. Josephine grabbed the porch railing for support. "What?" "Showed up this morning asking questions at the general store. Says he heard his brother died, wants to check on his brother's widow and children." Ben's voice was carefully neutral. "Beatrice Aldrich told him where to find you." "Of course she did." Josephine's mind spun. Thomas Hartwell, Daniel's older brother, the one who'd told Daniel moving west was foolish, who'd refused to help them financially, who'd made it clear he thought Daniel was throwing his life away. And now he was here, looking for her. "What does he want?" "Don't know. But Josephine?" Ben's expression was troubled. "He's family. Your children's uncle. If he's come to help, if he's offering support, then what? I should go back east with him, leave the ranch, leave." She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "I'm just saying, if he's offering security for you and the children, you should consider it. Whatever's between us." Ben's jaw tightened. "Whatever I want, that doesn't matter as much as what's best for your babies." "Don't tell me what's best for my children." "I'm not. I'm just—" He stopped, frustration clear on his face. "I'm trying to do the right thing here. The right thing is letting me decide what I want." "And what do you want?" The question hung between them, sharp and demanding. What did she want? Safety with Thomas back east, returning to a world that was familiar and predictable? Or this strange new life she was building in Wyoming, with work that fulfilled her and a man who looked at her like she mattered? Before she could answer, a voice called from inside. "Mrs. Hartwell, is there a Mrs. Josephine Hartwell here?" The voice was familiar. sharp-edged and cultured the accent of Philadelphia society. Thomas. Josephine straightened her spine. I'm here. Thomas Hartwell appeared in the doorway. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, well-dressed with Daniel's features, but harder, more severe. His eyes swept over her, taking in her work dress, her rough hands, the cabin visible beyond the ranch house. Josephine. His voice held disapproval. I heard you were living in reduced circumstances, but this is none of your concern. She kept her voice level. What are you doing here, Thomas? I came as soon as I heard about Daniel. 4 months, Josephine. It took 4 months for word to reach me that my brother was dead. I had no way to contact you. We had no money for telegrams. So I've heard. His gaze shifted to Ben. And who is this? Ben Cross, foreman at Stone Ranch. Ben's voice was polite but cool. Mrs. Hartwell works here. Works here. Thomas's tone made it sound obscene. My brother's widow working like a common laborer. This is what Daniel's great Western adventure came to. Daniel did the best he could, Josephine said sharply. He got sick. He died. I did what I had to do to keep our children alive. Yes, about the children. Thomas's expression softened slightly. I'd like to see them. They are my nieces and nephew after all. Josephine wanted to refuse. Wanted to send him away back to Philadelphia, back to his comfortable life where poverty was something that happened to other people. But he was right, he was family. The children's blood uncle. They had so few family connections left. They're inside. But Thomas, if you came here to judge me, I came here to help. He pulled an envelope from his coat. I've made arrangements. Tickets back to Philadelphia for you and the children. You can live with my family until you're settled. The children can attend proper schools. You can have a life again, Josephine. A real life. The envelope sat between them like a challenge. Philadelphia. Safety. Predictability. Everything she'd lost when Daniel dragged them west. Everything she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. I need to think about it. What's there to think about? Thomas's voice rose. You're living in a cabin on a ranch doing manual labor raising children in the wilderness. This isn't the life Daniel would have wanted for you. Daniel's dead. The words came out harder than she intended. And the life I'm building here is mine. Not his. Mine. Mama. Will's voice came from inside. Who's that man? Josephine turned to see all 3 children clustered in the doorway watching the strange man with wary eyes. They'd learned to be suspicious of strangers, learned it the hard way. Children, this is your Uncle Thomas, your Papa's brother. Papa had a brother. Maggie's voice was uncertain. Yes, baby. He lived far away, but he's come to visit. Thomas stepped forward, his expression warming slightly. Margaret, and you must be William, and this little one. He looked at Ruby. She has her father's eyes. Her name's Ruby, Will said, moving protectively closer to his baby sister. And she don't like strangers. I'm not a stranger, I'm family. You look like a stranger to me. Ben coughed, and Josephine could have sworn she heard him trying not to laugh. Thomas's expression tightened. Josephine, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Ben. Is that appropriate? Given your... Thomas's gaze moved between her and Ben. Given the circumstances. The circumstances are that Ben Cross saved our lives. He gave us shelter when we had none, work, when we were starving, and kindness when everyone else turned their backs. So yes, he stays. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Very well. Josephine, I know you've been through hardship. I understand you've had to make difficult choices, but Philadelphia offers stability, education for the children, a proper home. This is a proper home. This is a cabin on someone else's ranch. You're dependent on the charity of strangers. I earn my wages, Josephine said coldly. I work 4 days a week mending clothes, making curtains, whatever needs doing. I'm not accepting charity. I'm providing for my children through honest labor. Manual labor. Daniel would be ashamed. The words hit like a slap. Ben moved slightly, positioning himself closer to Josephine, and she felt gratitude for his solid presence. "Daniel had dreams," she said quietly. "Big dreams about land and ranches and building something from nothing. Those dreams died with him. What I'm doing now, working, surviving, keeping his children alive, that's honoring his memory, better than any amount of genteel poverty back east." "You don't mean that." "I do. Thomas, I appreciate the offer. I do. But I can't give you an answer right now. I need time to think, to talk to the children, to figure out what's best for all of us." "How much time?" "A week. Give me a week." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Josephine's expression must have stopped him. "Fine. 1 week. But Josephine, think carefully. This isn't just about you. It's about giving those children the future Daniel wanted for them." He left, and Josephine sagged against the porch railing, suddenly exhausted. Ben didn't touch her, but she felt his presence like warmth against the cold. "You all right?" "No. Yes. I don't know." She pressed her hands to her face. Everything was finally starting to feel stable, and now you got choices. That's not a bad thing, isn't it? Because right now it feels like the worst thing in the world. The week that followed was torture. Thomas took a room at Green River's only boarding house and appeared at the ranch every afternoon, bringing gifts for the children, books for Maggie, a wooden horse for Will, a doll for Ruby. The children, who'd never had much, were enchanted. Even Maggie, who'd been old enough to remember Thomas's disapproval of their move west, softened under the attention. "He's nice," Will announced one evening. "He says in Philadelphia there's a park with real swings and a pond with ducks. Can we go, Mama? Please?" "I don't know yet, baby. But I want to see the ducks." Josephine looked at Ben, who'd been quieter than usual all week. He met her eyes, and she saw resignation there. Saw him pulling back, giving her space to make this decision without his presence influencing her. It broke her heart a little. That night, after the children were asleep, she found him outside chopping wood he didn't really need, working off energy in the cold dark. "You're avoiding me." "Giving you space. There's a difference." "Is there?" She wrapped her shawl tighter. "Because it feels like you're pulling away." "Maybe I am." Ben sank the axe into the chopping block. "Maybe I'm trying to make this easier for you." "Easier how?" "By not being another complication. By not making you choose between what you want and what's sensible." He turned to face her. "Josephine, he's offering you everything I can't. Security, stability, a world where you don't have to work yourself to exhaustion just to survive. How can I compete with that?" "I'm not asking you to compete." "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking you to tell me what you want. Not what you think is best for me, not what's sensible, what you actually want." Ben was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I want you to stay. I want to court you properly. Marry you, eventually raise your children like they're my own. I want to build something with you, not just a marriage, but a real partnership. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, knowing I get to be part of your life." "But," Josephine heard it in his voice, "but I want you happy more than I want you here. And if Philadelphia makes you happy, if that's the life that's best for you and those babies, then I'll let you go. I'll walk you to the train station and wish you well and try like hell not to fall apart when you leave." Tears streamed down Josephine's face. "You're an idiot." "What?" "An idiot. A noble, self-sacrificing idiot who thinks what I need is security and predictability when what I actually need is—" She stopped, the words caught in her throat. "What? What do you need?" "You." The word came out broken. "I need you, Ben Cross. I need your patience and your kindness and the way you look at my children like they matter. I need the way you make me feel like I'm not just surviving, but actually living. I need—" He kissed her. Pulled her close and kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning, and Josephine kissed him back with 4 months of fear and grief and desperate hope pouring out between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ben pressed his forehead to hers. "Say it again." "I need you. I choose you. I choose this life we're building." She pulled back to look at him. "Thomas is offering me my old life back, but I don't want my old life. I want this. I want the ranch and the work and you. I want it all." "What about the children?" "They're happy here. Happier than they've been since Daniel died. Will has his chickens. Maggie has her kitchen work. Ruby has her strength back. They're thriving, Ben. We all are. But Philadelphia is a gilded cage. Safe, yes, but I'd be dependent on Thomas's charity, living in his house following his rules. Here I'm earning my own way. Here I'm free." Ben cupped her face in his calloused hands. "You're sure? Because once you tell him no, there's no going back. You're choosing Wyoming winters and ranch life and you. I'm choosing you." She smiled through her tears. "I'm choosing us." He kissed her again, gentler this time, and Josephine felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was what she wanted. Not the safety of her old life, but the possibility of this new one. "There's one thing," Ben said against her lips. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I'm gonna court you proper. Ask Colonel Stone for permission to marry you. Do it all the way it's supposed to be done. That'll take months. Good. Gives you time to be sure. Gives the children time to adjust. Gives the gossips time to find something else to talk about." He smiled. "I'm a patient man, Josephine Hartwell. I can wait. And if I don't want to wait, then we wait anyway. Because you deserve to be courted, not just rescued. You deserve romance and respect and time to grieve properly. I won't rush you, even if you're willing to rush yourself." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him they'd wasted enough time already, that life was short and uncertain, and they should grab happiness while they could. But looking at his steady, serious face, she understood what he was really saying. He was giving her space to be sure. Space to choose him not out of gratitude or desperation, but out of genuine feeling. Space to build something that would last. "All right," she said softly. "We do it proper." "But Ben—" "Yeah, I'm already sure." His smile was like sunrise. "Good. That makes two of us." The next day, Josephine told Thomas no. Told him thank you, but they were staying, they'd built a life here, and she wasn't giving it up. He argued, threatened to speak to Colonel Stone about her inappropriate relationship with the foreman, tried every angle to change her mind. None of it worked. "You're making a mistake," he said finally, standing in the ranch house parlor with his coat already on, ready to leave. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally thinking clearly for the first time in months." Josephine stood straight, shoulders back, meeting his disapproval without flinching. "Thomas, I know you mean well, but this is my life. Mine and my children's. And we're staying. Daniel would be disappointed. Daniel's dead, and I'm alive, and I'm choosing to live." She walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the offer. But we're home now." He left, and Josephine felt a weight lift she hadn't known she'd been carrying. The weight of other people's expectations, of trying to live up to a dead man's dreams of being someone she'd been instead of someone she was becoming. She found Ben in the barn, mucking stalls, and threw herself into his arms with enough force to make him stumble. "I told him no." "I heard." Ben held her tight. "You sure? Completely? Absolutely. 100% sure." "Good." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Because I already talked to Colonel Stone. Asked his permission to court you proper. He said yes, by the way. Said it's about damn time." Josephine laughed, the sound surprised out of her. "Everyone's been matchmaking, haven't they? Everyone with eyes. We weren't exactly subtle." "No, I suppose we weren't." They stood there in the barn holding each other while horses shifted in their stalls and winter wind howled outside. And Josephine thought about the woman she'd been 4 months ago, desperate, terrified, pointing a gun at this man, and the woman she was now, stronger, braver, willing to fight for happiness instead of just survival. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For not riding past that tent, for refusing to let us die, for being patient while I figured out what I wanted. You don't have to thank me for any of that." Ben pulled back to look at her. "That's just loving someone. You show up, you stay, you give them room to breathe while making sure they know you're not going anywhere. Is that what this is? Love? Getting there, maybe already there. You tell me." Josephine thought about it, about how her heart jumped when she saw him, about how safe she felt with him nearby, about how right it felt when he smiled at her children like they were precious. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think maybe it is." And standing there in the barn, with Ben's arms around her, and the future spreading out before them, uncertain but full of possibility, Josephine finally let herself believe in happy endings. Not the fairy tale kind, the real kind, the kind you earned through surviving hell and coming out stronger, the kind you built with your own hands and protected with everything you had, the kind worth fighting for. The courtship began the day after Thomas left formal and proper, despite the fact that half the ranch already knew Ben and Josephine had feelings for each other. Ben appeared at the cabin door that Sunday morning, dressed in his best clothes, hat in hand, asking if he might escort Mrs. Hartwell and her children to church services in Green River. "You ain't never been to church before," Will pointed out with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. "That's 'cause I didn't have a good reason to go before," Ben replied. "Now I do." Josephine felt her cheeks flush as she accepted his arm. They walked to town together, Ben carrying Ruby when she got tired, telling stories that made the children laugh and eased the awkwardness of being seen together publicly for the first time. The stares started the moment they entered the church. Josephine felt every eye on them as Ben led them to a pew near the middle, settling the children between them like a protective barrier. Whispers rippled through the congregation like wind through wheat. "Let them talk," Ben murmured. "They'll find someone else to gossip about next week." But Josephine wasn't so sure. She was Daniel's widow. Ben was the foreman who'd taken them in. The math wasn't hard to do, and she could see it being calculated in the faces around them. How long had this been going on? Had they been involved before Daniel died? Was she the kind of woman who moved from one man's bed to another without proper mourning? The thoughts made her sick, but she kept her head high through the service, sang the hymns, listened to Reverend Walsh's sermon about redemption and second chances. It felt almost pointed, like he knew exactly what his congregation needed to hear. After the service, the reaction was mixed. Some people congratulated them with genuine warmth. Others offered tight-lipped smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And Beatrice Aldrich, the banker's wife who'd threatened to take Josephine's children months ago, approached with an expression that promised trouble. "Mrs. Hartwell, Mr. Cross?" Her voice was syrup-sweet and poison-sharp. "How lovely to see you both. Together." "Mrs. Aldrich," Josephine kept her voice neutral. "I must say I'm surprised. It's been, 4 months since your husband passed. Some might think that's rather quick to be keeping company with another man." "Some might think it's none of their business," Ben said pleasantly, but his eyes were hard. "When it affects the moral character of our community, it becomes everyone's business." Beatrice's gaze moved to the children. "And these poor innocents watching their mother..." "Their mother is providing for them," Josephine interrupted, her voice like ice. "Working honest wages, keeping them fed and clothed and safe, which is more than this community offered when we were starving." "Well, No, you never did. Never offered help, never showed Christian charity, never did anything except judge." Josephine stepped closer, and Beatrice actually stepped back. "My husband died. I nearly lost my children. I did what I had to do to survive. And now I'm building a life with a good man who sees my children as blessings, not burdens. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with God. I'm done explaining myself to people who wouldn't lift a finger to help when it mattered." She turned and walked away, Ben and the children following. Behind her, she heard shocked whispers, but she didn't care. She was tired of being ashamed of surviving. Tired of apologizing for not dying along with Daniel. "That was something," Ben said quietly once they were out of earshot. "Was it too much?" "It was perfect." He smiled at her. "You're magnificent when you're angry." "I'm not angry, I'm just magnificent, trust me." The children were staring at her with wide eyes. Even Maggie, who'd seen her mother at her lowest, looked impressed. "Mama, you told Mrs. Aldrich off." "I shouldn't have. It wasn't ladylike." "But it was true," Maggie said firmly. "She was mean to us when we were hungry, and now she's being mean about you and Ben. She don't get to do that." "Doesn't," Josephine corrected automatically, but she felt warmth spread through her chest. Her daughter was fierce. Her children were fighters. They'd learned it from her watching her survive when survival seemed impossible. Maybe that was worth more than any amount of ladylike behavior. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Josephine worked her shifts at the ranch house, her mending so thorough that Lee May started having her make new items, curtains for the parlor, shirts for the ranch hands. Even a dress for one of the hands who was courting a girl in town and needed to look presentable. Ben courted her with a patience that was both touching and frustrating. He brought her wildflowers when the first shoots pushed through the melting snow. Sat with her on the cabin porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing while the children played. Asked her opinions about ranch decisions, treating her like a partner rather than just someone he was courting. And he waited. Never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Kissed her goodnight with gentleness that made her ache for more, then stepped back with a smile that said he had all the time in the world. "You're torturing me," she told him one evening in late March when the air had finally lost its bite and spring was coming in earnest. "Am I? You know you are. Being all proper and respectful when I—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. "When you what?" "When I want you to be less proper." Ben's eyes darkened. "Josephine, if I'm less proper, we're going to end up married within a week because I won't be able to stop myself from—" He bit off whatever he'd been about to say. "I'm trying to do right by you. Give you time to grieve, time to be sure this is what you want." "I've had time. I am sure. 4 months ago you were pointing a gun at me. 5 months ago, and I've changed my mind about you since then." "Have you?" He pulled her closer, his hands gentle on her waist. "Because I need you to be absolutely certain, Josephine. I need to know you're choosing me because you want me, not because you need me. There's a difference." "I know the difference." She put her hands on his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath her palms. "And I want you, Ben Cross. I want to marry you and build a life with you and give my children the father they deserve. I want all of it. When? As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if we could." He laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. "Give me 2 weeks. Let me talk to Colonel Stone about becoming a partner. Let me get us a proper house set up. Let me do this right. I don't need a proper house. The cabin is fine. The cabin's got 1 room and leaks when it rains hard. My future wife deserves better." His expression grew serious. "Colonel Stone's been talking about retiring. Wants to make me a full partner in the ranch, sell me his share. If that goes through, if I can swing the finances, we'd have the main ranch house. 5 bedrooms, real kitchen, everything you and the children need." Josephine's breath caught. "That's too much. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. I want to give you security, Josephine. Real security, not just shelter. I want you to never be afraid again." "I'm not afraid anymore. Not when I'm with you." "Good. Keep it that way." He kissed her forehead. 2 weeks. Can you wait 2 weeks? Do I have a choice?" "Not really. I'm gonna be stubborn about this." She laughed despite herself. "Fine, 2 weeks. But Ben, yeah, make it fast. I'm tired of waiting." The 2 weeks crawled by like months. Ben met with Colonel Stone working out the details of a partnership that would make him co-owner of Stone Ranch. The numbers were daunting. Even with his savings, Ben would need a loan from the bank payments spread over years. But Colonel Stone was adamant that Ben was the right choice, the man who understood what the ranch could be and would protect its legacy. "You're like a son to me," the old man said one evening when Josephine was delivering mended shirts to the main house and overheard the conversation. "I've got no children of my own. My brother's boy back east just wants to sell the place, turn it into profit. But you love this land. You'll build something that lasts." "I'll do my best, sir." "I know you will. And that woman of yours, she's good people, strong, the kind who'll stand beside you when times get hard." Colonel Stone's voice was warm. "You found yourself a partner's son. Don't let her get away." "Don't plan to, sir." Josephine backed away before they could see her, her heart full. Ben wasn't just courting her. He was building them a future, a real future with land and security and the promise of permanence. It was everything she'd thought she'd lost when Daniel died. The wedding was planned for the first Sunday in April, a small ceremony at the ranch with just close friends and the ranch hands. Lee May took charge of the arrangements with the efficiency of a general planning a campaign declaring that Josephine would have a proper wedding even if it killed them both. "You need a dress," Lee May announced one morning. "I have a dress." "You have work dresses. You need a wedding dress." "I can't afford." "Good thing I'm not asking you to pay." Lee May pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. "This was my wedding dress. 40 years ago when I married my husband. I want you to have it." Josephine unwrapped the package with trembling hands. The dress was beautiful white silk with delicate embroidery styled in a way that blended Chinese and American traditions. It was the most exquisite thing Josephine had ever seen. "I can't accept this. It's too precious." "You can, and you will. My husband is dead. I have no daughter to pass it to. But you're like a daughter to me now, and I want you to wear it when you marry that stubborn foreman." Tears streamed down Josephine's face. "Thank you. For everything. For giving me work, for believing in me, for nothing. You earned everything you got here." Lee May's voice was firm. "Now stop crying and try it on. We may need to alter it." The dress fit perfectly with only minor adjustments. Josephine stood in front of Lee May's mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked happy. She looked healthy. She looked like a woman who'd survived hell and come out believing in possibilities again. "Beautiful," Lee May said softly. "Ben will forget how to breathe when he sees you." The night before the wedding, Josephine sat with her children in the cabin, the four of them squeezed together on the narrow bed, like they'd done so many times in the tent. "Tomorrow I'm marrying Ben," she said quietly. "And I need to know you're all right with that. Really all right, not just saying it to make me happy." "I like Ben," Will said immediately. "He's teaching me about horses, and he says I can help with the spring foals." "I like him too," Ruby added, her small voice certain. "He tells good stories." Maggie was quiet longer. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Papa was my papa. Nobody's going to replace him, right?" "Never. Papa will always be your papa. But Ben could be something else, like a second papa. If you want him to be." Maggie considered this. "I think I do. Because Papa would want us to be happy. And Ben makes us happy. Makes you happy, Mama. I can tell." "He does make me happy." "Then that's what matters." Maggie snuggled closer. "Mama, are we going to live in the big house, the one with all the bedrooms?" "If everything works out with the partnership, yes." "Can I have my own room?" "You can each have your own room." Will's eyes went wide. "My own room, really? Really?" "Even me?" Ruby asked. "Even you, baby." They sat in silence for a moment processing this. Their own rooms. Space to breathe. The kind of security Josephine had thought was lost forever when Daniel died. "I wish Papa could see this," Maggie said softly. "See us being okay again." "I think he does see it," Josephine replied. "And I think he's glad we found Ben. Glad we found a way to be happy again." "Do you think he'd like Ben?" Josephine thought about Daniel, impractical, dreamy Daniel who'd dragged them west chasing impossible visions, and practical, steady Ben who'd saved them when those dreams turned to dust. They were different men, but they both had good hearts. Both wanted what was best for this family. "I think," Josephine said carefully, "that Papa would like anyone who loved you the way Ben does, who took care of you and protected you and made you smile." "Then he'd like Ben a lot," Will decided, "because Ben does all those things." "Yes, he does." "Mama?" Ruby's voice was sleepy. "Are we going to have a real family again?" "Baby, we never stopped being a real family. The four of us, we've been a family through everything." "But now we'll be bigger," Ruby persisted. "A bigger family, with Ben." "Yes, we'll be bigger." "Good. I like bigger." Josephine held her children close and let herself feel grateful. Grateful for Ben's patience, for Lee May's friendship, for Colonel Stone's faith in them, for the second chance she'd thought would never come. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring morning that felt like a promise. Josephine dressed in Lee May's silk gown with shaking hands, let Maggie help pin up her hair, accepted Ruby's wildflowers with tears in her eyes. "You look like a princess, Mama," Will breathed. "I feel like one." The ceremony was held in the ranch house parlor, packed with ranch hands and the few townspeople who'd shown kindness during Josephine's desperate months. Beatrice Aldrich was notably absent, but Josephine didn't care. Everyone who mattered was there. Ben stood at the front in his best suit, looking terrified and ecstatic in equal measure. When Josephine walked toward him on Colonel Stone's arm, she saw his eyes widen, saw him mouth beautiful, like he couldn't help himself. Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony with surprising warmth, talking about second chances and the grace of new beginnings. When he asked if anyone objected, Josephine held her breath, but silence held. No one spoke against them. "Do you, Benjamin Tucker Cross, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" "I do." Ben's voice was steady, certain. "I absolutely do." "And do you, Josephine May Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" Josephine thought about Daniel, about their first wedding, when she'd been young and naive, and thought nothing bad could ever happen. She thought about the tent and the starvation and the desperate months of survival. She thought about Ben, appearing in the blizzard, refusing to let them die. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, standing in borrowed silk in front of a man who saw her scars and loved her anyway. "I do," she said clearly. "With my whole heart, I do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ben cupped her face in his hands, gentle, despite the calluses, and kissed her like she was precious. Like she was everything he'd ever wanted. Like they had all the time in the world, and he planned to spend every moment of it loving her. The room erupted in applause and cheers. The children rushed forward, wrapping themselves around Ben's legs, and he scooped them up with a laugh, holding Josephine with one arm and all three children with the other. "We're a family now," he said, looking at each of them in turn. "All of us. Forever." "Forever," Maggie echoed solemnly. "Forever and ever," Will added. Ruby just wrapped her arms around Ben's neck and held on tight, and that said everything that needed saying. The celebration lasted into the evening. There was food, more food than Josephine had seen in one place since leaving Philadelphia, and music from one of the ranch hands who played fiddle. Ben danced with Josephine, then with each of the children, making them laugh and squeal with exaggerated moves. Colonel Stone made a toast, his voice thick with emotion. To Ben and Josephine, to new beginnings and second chances, to building something that lasts. To family, Lee May added, raising her glass. To choosing each other when the world says you shouldn't, to surviving and thriving. To love, Ben set his eyes on Josephine, to finding it when you least expect it, to holding on to it once you've got it. Josephine couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just raised her glass and let her tears say what words couldn't. Later, after the guests had left and the children were asleep in the cabin, Ben walked Josephine to the main ranch house. Their house now, or would be, once the partnership papers were finalized. "I got something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Wedding present." Inside was a ring, simple gold with a small diamond, nothing extravagant but beautiful in its plainness. "I know you sold your first wedding ring to buy food," Ben said quietly. "I know that probably hurt, giving up something that meant so much, so I wanted you to have this, a new ring for a new beginning. You don't have to wear it if it feels wrong, if it feels like you're replacing Daniel." "Stop." Josephine took the ring, slipped it on her finger. Perfect fit, like everything else Ben had given her. "I sold that ring because keeping my children alive mattered more than sentiment. Daniel would have understood that, and this—" She held up her hand, letting the small diamond catch the lamplight. "This isn't replacing anything. It's honoring everything. Honoring what I survived to get here. Honoring the man who saved us when no one else would. Honoring the future we're building together." "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Ben pulled her close, and Josephine went willingly, resting her head against his chest, where she could hear his heart beating steady and strong. "I love you," she whispered. "I know I haven't said it before, but Ben, I love you. Not because you saved us, not out of gratitude, but because you're good and kind and patient, and you make me believe in happy endings again." "I love you too," he replied, his voice rough. "From the moment I saw you pointing that gun at me with your babies behind you, and fire in your eyes, I knew you were extraordinary, and every day since then has just proved me right." They stood there in the doorway of their new home, holding each other, while spring wind carried the scent of new grass and possibility. Somewhere inside, Josephine heard a clock chiming midnight. A new day, a new life, a new chapter in a story she'd thought was over. "We made it," she said softly. "5 months ago, I thought we were going to die in that tent. And now you're Mrs. Cross. You got 3 healthy children, a homework you're good at, and a husband who thinks you hung the moon. Don't forget the chickens. Will would be devastated if I forgot the chickens." Ben laughed. "And the chickens. Can't forget General Feathers." Josephine pulled back to look at him, memorizing this moment. His face in the lamplight, the way he smiled at her, like she was everything, the solid reality of him after months of uncertainty. "Thank you," she said, "for not riding past that tent, for refusing to let us die, for being patient while I figured out what I wanted, for giving me this. You don't have to thank me for loving you. That's just what you do when you find something worth keeping." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're stuck with me now, Josephine Cross. For better or worse, remember. I remember. And Ben, yeah, I'm counting on mostly better from here on out. I think I've had my share of worse. Then better is what you'll get, I promise." And standing there in the doorway of their home with her children safe inside, and her husband's arms around her, and the promise of spring in the air, Josephine believed him. Believed in promises again. Believed in futures that didn't end in disaster. Believed in the possibility that surviving could transform into thriving if you were brave enough to reach for it. She'd been raising 3 children in a tent when a cowboy rode up in a blizzard and said she'd sleep under a roof that night. She'd thought he was offering shelter for one night's safety from one storm. She'd had no idea he was offering forever, But forever was exactly what she'd gotten. Forever in his arms, forever in this home, forever building something real and lasting with a man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. Forever teaching her children that second chances existed, that kindness was real, that surviving could be the beginning instead of the end. She'd pointed a gun at him once. Now she'd just promised him her life. And somehow, impossibly, that made perfect sense. Because that's what love was. Trusting someone enough to lower your weapons. Believing in them enough to risk your heart. Choosing them every day even when fear whispered that loss was inevitable. Josephine had lost before. Lost husband, lost security. Lost everything she thought defined her. But she'd gained something too. Gained strength she didn't know she possessed. Gained the kind of bone-deep resilience that only came from surviving the unsurvivable. Gained the wisdom to recognize real love when it appeared, even if it came in the form of a stubborn cowboy who refused to let a desperate widow and her children freeze to death in a blizzard. She'd been saved that night in the storm. But she'd saved herself too, over and over in all the days that followed. And now she was choosing to be happy, choosing to build a life with a good man, choosing hope over fear. That was the real victory. Not being rescued, choosing to stay rescued, choosing to believe that the future could be bright even after the past had been so dark. And as Ben led her inside their home, his hand warm in hers, Josephine looked back one last time at the cabin where they'd spent those first desperate weeks. The place that had been shelter when they'd had nothing. The place where she'd learned to trust again. "Thank you," she whispered to it, to the memory of her desperate self, to the woman she'd been, who'd fought so hard to become the woman she was now. Then she closed the door and walked forward into her future, knowing that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. She had Ben. She had her children. She had Lee May and Colonel Stone and the entire ranch community who'd welcomed them in. She had work that fulfilled her, and a home that was truly hers, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The blizzard had brought her Ben Cross, but she'd brought herself here to this moment through sheer stubborn refusal to give up, through choosing her children over her pride, through accepting help when accepting help felt like defeat, through surviving long enough to discover that surviving wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. And what a beginning it was. What a glorious, impossible, hard-won beginning.